Hello, Matt Gower here. Welcome to the Hard Folk Podcast. Today, my guest is Brian Gunther, also known as Woods of Light. So we had a great little talk. As you'll hear in the podcast, we first met when I sold him a guitar, and then since then, he was asking me for advice on how to get started in music and all that stuff, and we've gone back and forth and kind of helped each other out a little bit. So it's a cool little talk. I should also mention that on Saturday, March 28th, I will be playing at Quinn's in the John Allaire Show. So if you're in Ottawa, 3 to 5 p.m., drop on by. It's a pay what you can event. It's a intimate bar, so lots of people are going to be squeezed in tight there, so I hope to see you. But in the meantime, here is my talk with Brian Gunther. I am here with Brian Gunther, also known as Woods of Light. So welcome to the Hard Folk Podcast, Brian.
Thank you very much.
It's nice to see you in person. Like you said, it's been a long time since we've only ever met in person one time.
Right.
And I'm looking at your guitars in the background there. I'm trying to see if the guitar that I sold you is there. Do you still have it?
Yeah, it's there. It's behind the Black Norman. It's
nice.
The Martin. Yeah, it's there. It's one of my main guitars.
Cool. So yeah, we met, how long ago was it now? Like 2021, 22, something like that?
Yeah, it was something like that, like at least 4 years plus. Yeah.
And you made it for you, because you're in Quebec. It was a bit of kind of a hopeful trek to come all the way out to my neck of the woods. At the time I was in Riverside South, so it's on just the hope that this was kind of the guitar that you were looking for, and it turned out to be a good guitar. But what was more, I think, important and significant was that kind of we just kind of developed a connection and kind of have been like talking back and forth online over the years.
Yeah, it was a funny time because I think I was coming back from work. I worked in Ottawa, so it wasn't that much of a.
Oh, okay.
But I remember you mentioning, being a musician and performing, and at that point, I've been a songwriter for over 20 years, but I hadn't taken the leap. And I remember you sort of giving me some advice, and I took some notes.
Right. Yeah.
I acted on those notes many years after. It was really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. No, because I remember my impression was that you were kind of beginning your journey into performing. So why did it take you so long? Because you said you've been playing music for 20 years. Why did it take you so long to kind of cross that hurdle, get onto the stage?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. But yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I spent 13 years after high school, higher education. So I got a PhD. I think maybe we talked about this or not.
Yeah.
There was a lack of stability, student sort of stretched really thin, really difficult graduate program. And then moved out here, defended my dissertation. My oldest was born, started my own practice, I work as a clinical psychologist, by the way. So I was working on that goal, but also writing at the same time. My musicianship predates, my being a psychologist. So I've always just been a songwriter, but it took a while to be steady and stable enough to be able to dedicate some real time to taking that next leap, finishing a project. And I recorded Newcastle Park, my first album. I think it was just a lack of stability. It was so wild by the end of the week. There's no knowledge of how to get out there and what to do. There's maybe little energy left. It's just so busy and just pulled in so many directions that eventually I was finally able to settle, create a very consistent day-to-day routine. And then it happened.
Very cool. So that stability has really kind of fed your creativity.
Yeah, because then I get to devote actual time in the week, put it in my calendar. Whereas before, you're so busy. You're at school all the time, or in and out of hospitals, different training sites, and there's just no time to do something like that.
That makes a lot of sense. Especially if you're in medical training. My wife was a veterinarian, so I know that it takes up a lot of time. You got to know a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, is that why I'm curious? Because you say you use Woods of Light as a name. Are you looking for sort of a little bit of anonymity in the name, or is that what's the reason why you're going behind that?
Yeah, there's definitely a barrier to a separation between both worlds for sure. But there's also I see this project as it's my solo project, and I used to release music poorly recorded things on MySpace back in 2006, 2007, under my name. But I see it more of a project, it's yes, I'm a songwriter, but I like to work in my studio. As you can see, I've got a lot of stuff, and I use all of it. So I like to build records from the ground up, concept records. It's not uncommon that I'll have 12 different instruments on one song. So I think it sort of goes beyond just like sitting with the guitar, even though I write all the songs like that. It's
Hmm.
more of a project. And a lot of albums are definitely going to sound different and distinct. And you never know, maybe I'll get some other folks to play with me in the future. So then it'll sound like it's a band. But you're right. A lot of people think that they're getting a band, and it's just because on the album it sounds like there's a band playing.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I didn't want to name it my own name. I just chose to name it something, that it took me a long time to find the name. And it's actually a play on the my hometown. So I grew up in a town called Boisbriand. It's 25 minutes north of Montreal.
Okay.
And a lot of people used to colloquially and jokingly refer to it as Flashwood, where I'm
Hmm.
from. So
Hmm.
Boisbriand, brilliant wood, woods of light. So it's kind of a play on that.
That makes sense now. I like it. Now, like in looking over your two albums that are on like iTunes and all that stuff, it seems that nature seems to be a big inspiration. Am I barking up the right tree there? I guess you could say.
Yeah, good pun, by the way. But yes, you are for sure. Yeah, I mean, I've always been really into the outdoors. Like even now, like I live in Val des Monts, so I live on a pretty large property, like basically dumped in the middle of the woods on a mountain. It's always been a huge part of me. So yeah, it's not. I wouldn't say it's completely intentional in the music, but it's interesting that you're able to pull that out because yeah, that is a really big part of my identity. It's like nature, connecting with nature.
Well, yeah, like Compass Points North was your most recent EP, and I think you said you wrote that about like was it a childhood experience or growing up? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, it's about. Are you familiar with Parc National du Mont-Tremblant? Like the
I'm sure I've been there, but I don't know it very well.
It's essentially about that park. And the title song, Compass Points North, I wrote that when I was really young, 17, 18.
Okay.
And I had this idea for like a mini album, and I ended up finishing it 20 years later. So it's never too late, right? But yeah, that's basically about my memories of going up there with family in the 90s when I was a kid.
How did revisiting something that you wrote as a teenager all those years later change your perspective?
It was really interesting because so Compass Points North, the title song, was the one that I wrote when I was younger, and then the other three I wrote here and there, not so long ago, maybe for
Mhm.
the past 5 to 10 years, possibly less. But it was interesting to sort of get back in the mind of the 17, 18-year-old me, who just been playing guitar for a handful of years at that point, was
Yeah.
beginning to explore open tunings. I think Compass Points North might be the first song I ever wrote in an open tuning.
Okay.
So it's kind of rudimentary. I still have the old demo, and the studio track does not sound like the old demo with the whispered vocals and like a $5 Radio Shack tabletop with the sock on it, just as a
Yeah.
pop filter. But yeah, it was interesting to kind of go back and see, how I may have been thinking about music and structure. And I'm a big progressive rock guy. Like I'm not so much into, well, I guess I am into folk music, but I'm more of like a progressive rock metal guy. And the structure itself, like I think it really fits with that world, or lack
Okay.
thereof, of song structure.
So you say you're into progressive rock and metal. How did you transition from those like kind of listening habits to how's that relate to folk music to what you're playing now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's been a wild ride for sure. I mean, we seem to be about the same age. You probably grew up in the 90s, skateboarding, punk rock, that kind of thing.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
so it started with that. I remember that was a huge part of, my identity when I was a kid, and then getting more into it in my early teenage years, 12, 13. But eventually I just got into metal, my friends and I all together when we were 14, maybe 15, the classic stuff, Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, Pantera.
Hmm.
And we all started playing guitar around that time. And then we explored things like Dream Theater and Opeth and Porcupine Tree and like the progressive metal realm. And that opened the door to more old school progressive rock, Pink Floyd, Camel, Genesis, Gentle Giant, that kind of thing. And I remember the folk thing came in. I got really into Johnny Cash at some point. And then I
Okay.
started listening to the Grateful Dead.
Nice.
Elliott Smith was a big one. Ron Sexsmith, of course, I'm really into Ron's music.
Yeah.
And then other things too, like American Music Club, Red House Painters, Sun Killed Moon, Nick Drake, of course. Nick Drake was a huge influence on my early playing. So that world opened up. And I started really digging into that kind of music. So that's when I got myself an acoustic guitar because I got really into, the idea of, just being me in the acoustic guitar writing songs. But I think it really did start from the shift from like, old school sort of Bay Area thrash metal to more progressive metal because bands like Opeth have these amazing acoustic passages in their songs that seem to come out of nowhere. So I think that was the initial inspiration for at least exploring the acoustic guitar and then making its way into the more like acoustic focused music.
And now, are there elements of heavy metal that are kind of hiding away in your music, or is it pretty much just all progressive folk, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, I think progressive folk is a good way to describe it. I'd say maybe the song structure, the ideas, like the underlying, because the song itself, it's interesting when you think about that, because I could probably rearrange some of my music as being progressive metal songs, if I really wanted to. But
Yeah.
I think the inspiration for doing the solo thing full force was just there's a lack of band, like you can't really do.
Hmm.
Well, I guess you could play, with a backing track. But when I was younger, I had like a progressive metal band. We had a MySpace and everything. 12-minute long songs, that kind of thing. But it was just hard to take the next step because we didn't have like a drummer or people played the bass or something. So doing it by myself felt more sort of accessible.
Sure.
But yeah, no, it's a good question. No, there's no like outright like metal parts in the songs. So I'd say maybe just like the underlying sort of the attitude or the structure or something like that was definitely rooted in that kind of music for sure.
Nice, nice. Now, what we nature is an inspiration, but is there anything like what else inspires you to write a song? When you're writing a song, what do you start with?
Yes, I'm really like deep into my next project now. But like for example, like Newcastle Park, my first album was a very nostalgic album.
Okay.
Memories of the '90s, growing up, coming of age, the people, the things that have influenced me, made me who I was. And then Compass Points North, as you can see, there's like a theme here. They're conceptual records.
Sure.
So that was very much about like nature and immersing yourself in nature. The album I'm working on now is now in 3 volumes. So it's there's like 11 songs per album. Like I've been wrote something like 45 songs since August.
Wow.
It's been a crazy flurry of songwriting, but this is a big one. Like this one conceptually, mentally, I've been devising it for many years now.
Hmm.
It's really my album about like human nature,
Okay.
like the human condition. And a lot of people ask me like, are you going to use your psychological knowledge and influence songs? And I think this is my version of that. It's not so on the nose of like, let me write a song about, being anxious or something like that, but it's more about phenomena that are relatable. We tend to divide ourselves a lot, right?
Hmm.
But it's really about the types of experiences that bind us together as a species. Like no matter where we are in the world, we've all experienced distress, heartbreak, all these different things. So I mean, there's a lot of songs because we're very complex. There's a lot of different nuance. So yeah, that's my main inspiration right now. I was thinking about different experiences, different phenomena like self-fulfilling prophecies, staying with somebody where it's not a good relationship, but something still keeps you there, longing for somebody, like just so many different things. It's basically a bottomless well, right? Because there are so many different experiences that we could have. But right now, that is the main source of inspiration.
And you've got an interesting perspective because like everybody who comes to you, like if as a patient or whatever, we all feel like everybody, and whether it's with a therapist or whatever, even if you're just talking with your friends, like so a lot of people just feel alone in their experiences, and the pandemic is really kind of drove home that isolation even more. But you are almost like similar to Alan Lomax, where he was collecting folk songs. You're collecting all these stories, and you see all the connections between all the different people that. So it's just really interesting to kind of uh, just picture that perspective in your mind. And another thing that really makes me curious is as a psychologist, um, do you feel like you have like your superpower is almost being really tapped into emotion, or is that almost like a work thing, and you have to separate the two?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, that one for sure. I mean, that comes up a lot like in our schooling, right? But there's definitely like you could learn about different orientations of therapy. Like if you've ever heard a term called cognitive behavioral therapy, I mean,
I've done it.
that's something that you learn,
Yeah.
that so it's sort of a skill that you learn. But I think more innately as a therapist, like just understanding, validating, being patient, being warm, being empathetic. Like, I guess it is something you could practice for sure. But, I think a lot of us just sort of have that.
Yeah.
And I find I've always been that kind of person, like you've always been into like, like my pets, my animals, like working in animal rescues, like now I have my boys, which are, obviously my entire life. It's always just been a part of me, like I find that kind of side. And it's not a newer endeavor for me. Like I remember wanting to do this all the way back to like early junior high school, like that kind of that time, just being there for friends, sitting, listening. And you're right. I mean, it's a good point you bring up because there is a song on this album about, isolation and invalidation. not being
Hmm.
heard.
Hmm.
But I mean, you wouldn't think it's so rare, but it is. I was thinking about that this morning about how we tend to jump into problem solving immediately when somebody comes with you and says, like, I had a really rough day. It's like, well, did you do this? And why didn't you do that? Or like, maybe you should do this. Where some people just want, like, yeah, that sounds really hard. Like, I'm really sorry you went through that. That sounds really, really hard. Something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, part of it I think could be taught. I think part of it is just like it tends to tap into like your identity, your personality. Like what kind of person you are. And for me, I see it a bit like my days are odd now because they're a bit more seamless. You get up, kind of jumped into the practice, but then there might be a hole in my calendar. So I go into like music production, but then I go back into my practice. It's just like a ebbing and flowing. But I don't find that I put on and take off hats. Like we say, use that expression,
Hmm.
put your therapist hat and take it off. It's
Hmm.
what's like a seamless blending of different things. And it's just all part of what I think, is who I am, which is a reason why I tend to not take too much time away from work or not super interested in going away, on vacation. I just like what I'm doing now regularly. It's just part of what I've always wanted to do.
So it's all music, it's all family, it's all work. Everything is the same.
Yeah, it's extremely busy, and as a father yourself, right, you could probably relate for sure. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's super busy. It's controlled chaos, like trying to get everything done in the week. But
Hmm. Hmm.
it works, and I think it's something that I've worked towards for so long that there's an awareness on a daily basis of just how in the zone I am with certain things. Whereas in the past there were a lot of tough periods, growing up, being a student, just the never ending sort of experience with school and all that. So I think I would say that I'm appreciative on a daily basis. I try to take a moment in the day and just really appreciate what I have. It kind of keeps me going.
Nice, nice. Now you mentioned family and your boys. How do you balance? You have a triple album coming out soon, and you write and you're producing, doing all the things. How do you balance making music with family life?
It's really not easy, but at the same time it works. Like one thing I will mention is it's not until you have kids that you realize just how precious time is or lack thereof, right? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
such a limited amount of time, which I find that it's made me so efficient now that it's almost like you're on a train and the train is not gonna stop it. It's just kind of we're just gonna keep going. Whereas before you kind of take time for granted. You're sitting around on a Sunday, you're not getting much done. Like I would say before, like, oh, I want to record this song and I've had a week and nothing was there on the weekends, but it's like you're not really using your time efficiently. So that's a huge thing that I've noticed since having kids. Like I've become extremely efficient because I have to, or else you don't
Hmm.
survive. So that's one of the main things. Balance for sure. Balance, flexibility, logistics, priorities. Like priorities help a lot because it's something where like if one of my kids is sick, must stay home. It's like, well, I really wanted to record that day, but that goal is being tabled until another day, and it's disappointing, but it also makes sense. Kind of
Yeah.
fits. It's just like this is my priority. This is what I'm doing. So organization, efficiency, everything that I mentioned. I mean, it really is you're on the survival mode on a daily basis. So you got to put your head down and just kind of do go with the plan that you've set out for yourself and trust in the plan.
Yeah, and with music, it really does take a lot of planning these days. How have you kind of strategized your own music career, like whether it's like releases and like just making sure people hear your music?
It's not easy to get out there, right? Like it's
No,
I didn't know
especially if
any.
you're far out, like if you're far away from a lot of venues, like
Yeah,
in Val des Mots. So
I tend to perform a little bit more in the warmer months. I tend to hunker down in the winter, and kind of
sure.
in the studio. But yeah, it's not an easy balance, right? Because like you're writing, you're recording, you're promoting yourself, you're wearing all the hats, you're doing all the
Mhm.
things. Um, I would say that my main focus is really writing. I mean, that's where the love comes from. That's like the deep enjoyment of music is really kind of sitting down in the studio and just watching things happen. Sometimes the
Yeah.
song will take on a life of its own, and that's my favorite thing. There's a kind of reward or fulfillment from that that's hard to understand unless you've experienced some kind of an artistic fulfillment that where it all comes together better than you thought. I mean, that's really what I live for musically. And yeah, I never thought that I would end up in a position where I was like performing, like I think the first year that I released Newcastle Park in the summer, I was performing weekly, and it's just like an odd alternate reality kind of to fall into, right? Because I never
Mhm.
done that thing. But yeah, meeting folks, I mean, meeting people like you, for example, like that's been my favorite thing about getting out there. Like performing is a lot of fun, but like making connections, talking to like-minded people who could actually, really understand, because like, for example, my spouse is not a musician, and no fault of hers, right? But when I'll say something like, oh yeah, I did this in the studio, it'd be like, oh, that sounds fun, that sounds nice. And it's just like supportive for sure, but it's just that understanding from somebody who has the same passion as you. Like that's been really great.
For sure. Like being able to talk shop, like my favorite thing is going out to an open stage and sitting down at the bar with like a fellow musician and just like talking about like our favorite reverb pedals or whatever, you know what I mean? Like it's stuff like that. Yeah, now you record your own stuff. How did you kind of develop that skill?
Yeah, I mean that's a really long story. I'll try to keep it, at least somewhat brief. But I mean, I've always really been somebody into recording, like as far as I can remember. Like when I was a kid in the '90s, I had this like little Sony sports radio with the tape deck, and
Yeah.
used to put my own radio shows. You DJ, then you flip to FM radio, and you put on a song. Like I used to really like doing that, mock interviews with friends, skits. So I've always been somewhat into recording or producing something. And then, of course, when I started writing music, well, I started recording myself in my basement, using like super lo-fi. Like I talked about the $5, that's a real story, like a
Yeah.
little tabletop microphone, whispering vocals into it so nobody could hear me sing from upstairs.
Yeah.
It grew. It really is something that grew. And then there's actually something really remarkable that happened over time where when I was in undergrad, I was applying to grad schools across the country, and I got rejected from every single grad school.
Wow.
So then I had to apply again the next year for the year after that. So I had a year to kill in between. So I worked a couple different jobs, I volunteered, that kind of thing. But I had a bit more time on my hands, and I told myself like this is the time to do it, to actually learn music production for real. So I got myself a Mac. I got Logic, which I'd always wanted to use, and I sort of sat there. I had the Mac in my bedroom, and I started learning. I started really trying to teach it to myself, looking at tutorials. So it grew from there. It's kind of it's a skill you build over time. And now here I am. This did not happen overnight. This is a long, long, long time in the making.
Well, yeah, and when you listen to your music, like there's a lot of moving pieces going in there. So you're doing a good job with that for sure. Um, Now, when you do sit down and just write a song, do you have a set process? Like give me what it looks like. Take me through your songwriting process if you have one.
Yeah, no, I definitely do. I mean, it depends. It takes on different shapes. So for this project specifically, I would find myself like, carving out 4 hours on a Monday morning or something like that, and sitting in my studio with nothing. So it's either with nothing or with something I recorded on my phone. I was sitting on the couch over the weekend with one of my kids, like an idea that I thought had promise. And that's how I write it. Usually I'll sit down. I have maybe like a verse chorus structure, which is oftentimes the most common scenario, a vocal melody. So I'll start recording. So I'll record the demo as I write it, which is why I could have like 30 different songs that are completely finished in Logic and sound somewhat decent, but unreleasable because I wrote them as I recorded them. So they're sloppy,
Sure, yeah.
um, but yeah, that's how I write it. So I will sit with a guitar away from the computer, and I'll just like record something on my phone, like ideas, vocal melodies, lyrics, but really sit in the studio, kind of put a click track in Logic, record the acoustic part, add some vocals, start layering in other instruments. So that's really the writing process for me is production based. It's kind of like building the song as I write it, really.
Yeah. Now, do you build it from a melody or a chord structure, or do the lyrics come first? Do they come afterwards? How's that work?
It's usually from the music first. So like a finger picking pattern, chord structure, as you mentioned, something like that. It's rarely like a vocal melody. Or, I mean, for this album, I had ideas of lyrics, like we talked about all the themes, the human condition and all that. So I have a 90-page document with notes and things, that I want. Like I've been compiling it for years. So it might inform the lyrics. Let's say like, okay, this is the right mood for this theme. And then maybe I'll start writing lyrics. This time around, what I've done is a lot of my demos have like nonsense lyrics. Like I'll just sing something without real lyrics. I'll make things up. It doesn't make sense, but like I'm writing vocal melodies because there's just so much time, like doing this takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's lyrics are their own thing, like I might listen to the demo after as an MP3 and then come up with lyrics that I think fit that melody.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, right now, that's how I'm writing lyrics. Sometimes it happens all at once. It's not uncommon that I'll sit down and write the song and all of the lyrics come if I'm feeling particularly inspired, but I mean, it depends. It really does depend on like what's happening in that moment.
I like to call that the scrambled eggs method because that's how Paul McCartney came up with Yesterday. He just had the melody and was singing scrambled eggs, and
Yeah.
so that's a good way. And I've been kind of playing around with that a little bit. That it's a tough way to write a song because you're basically just kind of like trusting your subconscious, I guess, in a sort of way.
Yeah. By the way, I listened to your album.
Oh, thanks.
And I thought it was great. It's funny because I was thinking, I was like, oh, I'm getting like Nebraska, the strip back. And then I wrote your liner notes and you wrote Nebraska. I just wanted to mention that, like, yeah,
Oh,
I listened to it across 2 days and it was great. I mean, I think you did a really good job with that. I really like the songs. Good lyrics, by the way. I wanted to mention that. Yeah.
thank you so much. Um, Now, you talked about your musical influences, like, like metal and prog rock and all that stuff. I'm going to put you a bit on the spot here. Um, what would be just a personal influence on your music path?
Yeah. So, like, I mean, I think a good answer to that would be even thinking about Newcastle Park, the first album that I put together. I mean, that was very much an autobiographical album, but really like an exploration of my lived experience, if you will, growing
Hmm.
up, the people, the memories I have, like questioning, why do I remember this? Like, why this moment when I was 8 or 7 or something, like what's significant about that? And then drawing the meaning out of that. I did that a lot with that album. It might be something like renting a video game, right, in the 90s. But it's just like, what was the significance of my mother taking us out in a snowstorm at 5 o'clock at night in the dark of like late December to rent a game? And it's about, unconditional love, right? So that song becomes about that. So that's really how I draw like inspiration, I guess, lyrically, right? So like lyrically like that. And I've always been a writer. Like this predates music. Like I've always been somebody who really truly enjoyed writing as a craft, writing stories in the 90s, coming up with comic books, mock video games, poetry,
Hmm.
analytical essays, creative writing. I just really love creative writing. In fact, in when I was in graduate school, which is the antithesis of creating writing, like scientific writing is the absolute antithesis. It was hard. It was hard to write that way. I had a teacher at some point who wrote in big red ink on my thesis, flowery and pedantic. And I always remember that one because I didn't take it as an insult. I laughed when I saw it and I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Like it's hard to get into that zone when this is your
Yeah.
default mode of writing, like writing in a really dry, boring way, I found.
So songwriting in that sense for you is almost well is a release or a release from the dryness and the clinicalness
Mhm. Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
stuff.
It's own
Um,
little like what's that word I'm trying to find? Solace, like
yeah,
you
yeah.
go there, you put your head down and this is your world right now and you get to just live in it.
Yeah, no, that's why, yeah, like I'm a very like logical person, but at the same time I'm very creative too. So yeah, the science world does not mesh with with my brain either. Yeah, so I've got maybe a couple more questions for you, but I'm curious, when you're writing a song, who are you writing for?
I would say that I'm writing for myself. Yeah, I've been asked that question a lot before, and I thought about it a lot. But when I do write, I don't mean to sound selfish, but I really do think that well, anyways, this is for me, right? This is my own belief. But as an artist, you must be sort of selfish. Like I am writing very much for myself and my own artistic fulfillment. I don't know. I have a lot of different beliefs when it comes to like music and products and things like that. But I do believe that as an artist, like you must sort of write to satisfy your own artistic curiosity, your own artistic fulfillment. That if you're sort of writing to try to please somebody else, I think it crosses this kind of threshold where like I guess it could be both, right? But for myself, given like the style that I write in, like I know a lot of stuff that I write is not accessible and it's not easy to listen to, like the title song off Newcastle Park is like 11 minutes long. Like I know people see that and they recoil and they're like, what is this? Like songs are too long. I have the tendency to write very long songs, but sometimes I sit and I think like, is this too long? And then I realize, well, it is going to be what it wants to be. The song goes where it wants it. If it ends up being 3.5 minutes, so be it. If it ends up being 15 minutes suite of different things, so be it. It really is for me. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but I do really tend to write for myself, for that, just to satisfy that kind of urge.
Yeah, and I think the majority of solo like folk creative people do write that's who we all write for. If you're not happy with what you're writing, then what's the point? Like, and it's an extension of the kind of the self-critical kind of aspect of songwriting because you got to be able to know what you're trying to say whether you like what you're trying to say. That's the second step. So yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. And a thought popped into my mind because you're bilingual. Do you write only in English, or like is English your first or second language? Like where does French kind of fit in with all this?
So English is not my first language. Like French is my mother tongue. I
Yep.
actually didn't know a word of English until I was 5.
Huh.
I got sent to English school, kind of thrown into the fray, baptism by fire and all that. But music, I mean, English is my primary language. Now I barely speak French anymore. So no, I do not write in French. It's a goal that I've had. I mean, I thought it could be interesting. I've lost out on a few different opportunities, at least because my music was not French, in Quebec with the laws and that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, it would be nice. It's just I don't know. I'm not really that great at writing in French. Like I can't get my mind around rhymes and prose and all those things, right? To me in English, it's just so natural. It comes out very naturally. But in French, I mean, I've barely ever, I don't even know what it would come. It could be good exercise to try and see. But no, I have not written any songs in French.
Yeah, no, I was just curious about that because, like, I guess probably your brain goes into separate spots in your mind when you're in those two different languages.
I would say my French itself is just very sort of communicative. Like even writing in French is a challenge for me. I was never great at French class. Having to write like emails in French, that kind of thing. It's not easy. It's more of a verbal thing. I grew
Yeah.
up in like small town, in Quebec. It's working class family, that kind of thing. So it's just very communicative. Writing wise, it's very difficult. It's a completely other. It's a whole different animal, if you will. Like writing properly in French.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard because I feel like there's more rules in French than there are in English. I grew up doing French immersion in school, and you got to learn every word, whether it's feminine, masculine, and all that stuff. And it's tough. And then applying all those rules and breaking all those rules is another important part about songwriting. Breaking the rules, it's tough. So I was just curious. That's interesting though to hear your perspective on that. So. Yeah, we're running out of time, so we're gonna end it here. But I was gonna ask what's next, but it sounds like you're kind of in the middle of it right now with that with this triple album. So maybe tell me about your plans for that.
Yeah, that's gonna be. I try not to think too much. It's kind of like standing at the foot of a mountain and looking up, and how long it's gonna take. I mean, this will keep me busy for years, definitely. Yeah, so it's a triple album, but then in the writing sessions, like another album emerged. So I have something like 44 songs that I need to record. But right now, yeah, the triple the 3 volume album, it's divided into like 3 11 song LPs. So that's what will keep me busy. Like I'm entering pre-production for the first one now, organizing things, microphone selection, restringing everything, setting up logic files, like that kind of more boring stuff. But then I hope to record it in less of I want to say the word surgical. Like with Newcastle Park, it was my first one. I wanted it to be good, So like I would do things just meticulously, like multiple takes. And with this one, I just want it to be more organic, more raw. That's the idea. It's supposed
Sure.
to represent, like the raw sort of, the roots of being human, if you will. So a long take, an uninterrupted verse headed into the chorus until I stop, little nuances, swing here and there. I think it's going to add to it a lot. And I guess in a way it'll help, with timelines because it won't take as long, hopefully, to record. But yeah, I'm really deep in that now and about to actually begin recording.
Well, cool. Well, good luck with that. I'll be really looking forward to hearing that once it's released into the world.
Yeah, I hope it won't be long. I mean, I hope to finish the first volume at least by the end of the year, like maybe the fall or something like that. I think it's a pretty nice timeline, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Brian, also known as Woods of Light, Brian Gunther, thank you for joining me. It was a great talk. Well, I'm sure we'll be chatting back and forth on Instagram for years to come.
Yeah, probably. And look, thanks for having me. It was really nice to see you after all these years, by the way.
All right, thanks again to Brian for joining me. Like I said off the top of the show, come down to Quinn's Saturday, March 28th. I'll be playing from 3 to 5 p.m. with John Allaire, 1070 Bank Street. It's going to be a great show, so I hope to see some new faces there. Come and enjoy a pint in the afternoon, and then it'll give you an excuse to have a 5 p.m. nap after the show's done. So I will hopefully see you there, and talk to you next time.